This is Dale Allen with Gardner Webb. I'm just recording a short video for you tonight. My other video didn't record from when I was with class tonight, but if you weren't with me, this was a short one anyway. This is week 7. Please remember that next week we will not have class. It'll be week 8. You should be wrapping up your OMA 3 this week, and you should knock out task 4 next week. Please remember, and we talked about this in the regular class session tonight, that you do not have to peer review task 4. That's just your reflection on competencies. Start putting that together. I'd like for us, when we get back together again in 2 weeks, for you to be starting on task 1 of the skip, because you got to do task 1, task 2 of the skip, and task 1 of the cap. For those of you who have been questioning that, everybody in 603, whether you're regular or add-on, will do all 4 tasks of the OMA, the first 2 tasks of the skip, and the first task of the cap. There's 7 tasks due in Mels 603, regular or add-on, it does not matter. So get to it. Try to finish up 3 this week, knock out 4 next week. Again, you don't have to peer review it, and then compile your 4 tasks and put them into task string. Please remember, as always, just like with the AppSell and the AppTel, when you put your comprehensive paper together with all 4 tasks in it, move all your references and appendix to the end, and don't have them at the end of the task. So that was a reminder for that. As you can see on the screen, next week we have no Zoom session, fall break. Looking at what I just covered, let's see if that will disappear from my screen. Okay. As I just said, we're finishing up, as this is week 7, we're finishing up task 3 this week. We should finish up task 4 next week. You don't have to do, as it shows here, there is on the schedule, there is no peer review of task 4. That's why I don't have it on the schedule. And when we meet again in 2 weeks, you should be ready, or we should be on task 1 of the skip. Yeah, remember, skip task 1 and 2, OMA, cap task 1. All 4 of the OMA, first 2 of the skip, first 1 of the cap. That's what's due this semester. All right, this week, in Blackboard with cyberbullying, I had you to read the cyberbullying statute from the state reporting manual. Here it is, and I'll read that to you quickly. And the reason I have this one separately is there's been a lot of confusion. In 2000, okay. Social relationship bullying consists of indirect, covert attempts to affect the target's reputation or social standing. It may or may not include cyberbullying, which is use of information and communication technology such as email, cell phones, pagers, text messages, instant messaging, and defamatory personal polling website to intentionally harm others. All right. There's been some confusion on this one. Folks believe that this was repealed. That is not true. What was repealed was the part where if you were simply engaging in a Twitter war or a Facebook battle where you were writing defamatory things about somebody else and they were writing back and you were engaged in some kind of battle, that's not bullying, that's speech. But the rest of the statute stayed in place. If it's one side, if you're using social media and other things to defame somebody, that is cyberbullying. Now, the example that I gave in class tonight is a local high school here in Cornelius Huff High School, where they found a young man had some inappropriate things on his phone. But they called in the police, and they found it to be a pornography where he was taking pictures, having inappropriate relationships and sex with underage girls, and it led to a big investigation. Well, it didn't look good for the school, but the administrators survived it because they found it themselves, turned it over to the police. They didn't ignore it and say, oh, there's no law. Not our problem. Cyberbullying can occur anywhere. It doesn't just have to happen at your place. It can happen anywhere. The internet has no physical boundaries. And so it doesn't matter if they wrote the text at your school. It doesn't matter if they're showing it. If it happens, you need to take action. Is the point? There is a law on the books that prohibits it. It has not been repealed. That law is still there. The only part that was repealed was the part about if you're involved in a mutual war with one another, that's not bullying. But the rest of that statute is still in place. Call the law. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. Again, it may not be popular for you to call the police, and parents may not like it. Doesn't matter. It may lead to something bigger. And it's a lot better if you are the one that called the police. The deal with at the high school locally is he took them some of those pictures on campus and had some of those inappropriate sexual contact with those younger girls on campus. There was a middle school next door. Those things happened on campus, and so by them turning it in, it kind of deflected the questions as who was minding the store? Why weren't you watching this guy? How could these things happen on your watch? It deflected from that. Now, it wasn't a feather in their cap, but they didn't lose their job either. You don't want to be on the end of somebody like me who's had to do it, to come out and fire everybody from the principal down to the secretary because you were letting it happen and then you covered it up. You do not want that to happen. So please remember, cyberbullying is a statute. It's still on the books. You still must take action. Involve the police. We don't want it to become known. People, well, in the end, you'll come out a lot better if you involve them and get them involved and do the right thing. Even though maybe that's not been done. Now, I understand that there is this conflict between what's supposed to happen in schools and what happens in your school. I'm trying to train you to be the administrator, but when you get your school, you run it the right way. Doesn't matter that we've always done it this way for years and years. Again, that's one of those situations where it can have been happening for the last 20 years, but when you go to court, you can't say, well, we knew it was happening. We didn't do anything about it because nobody else has ever done that. You don't want to be that idiot. And as I told you last week, and I had you do your last week's assignment about liability, being held legally liable for things that happen. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Somebody's being abused by somebody else in the school, knows that take any action, they can sue you and get damages from you. So these are the kinds of things that you better be taking. Cyberbullying has become the number one problem, in my opinion, in schools. Number one, in terms of bad things can happen to you in your career. You better take it seriously, and you better know that the law was not repealed. Only the part about the speech part, but a mutual thing like Twitter wars. Other than that, it's still in place, and you better know that. We also tonight we talked about the master schedule. I had a question from one of my students who's in a private school that really doesn't have a hierarchy, but again, the notion on the schedule is what's the process? I'm more interested that you learn the process of scheduling. We start with federal law, state law, local policy, best practices, teacher input. I love teachers, was one, married to one, but teachers don't always have the student's best interest at heart. Sometimes it's self-serving, what they want, so they have to come last. Best practices in high school, best practices is make sure that once you get all of your legal stuff done, that you go to your one-off classes, like band, and make sure that you don't put them at the same time of another one-off class that band students are most likely to be in, like calculus. Band kids are usually your best kids. They're in your higher level classes, which you only have one of. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Best practices, teach reading before lunch. Well, that sounds easy, except that you got your specials and they may not be full-time at your building. PE, art and music, things like that. It's harder to work these things out than you think. So best practices is using common sense things. Don't have 3 lunch shifts unless you can help it. Unless somebody makes you do it, don't have 3 lunch shifts if you have a block schedule in a school where you have 90-minute blocks. Because that means you go to class for 45 minutes, then you go to lunch and you come back. That just gives teachers an extra 45-minute planning because none of the kids ever come back. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. You need to understand how a schedule is put together. What are the priorities? Where do we start? Once we get through with state, federal, state, local, what are then our priorities? Well, you look at your one-offs, you look at specials, you look at maybe teachers that are there only part of the day, you look at those kinds of things. You also try to rotate. Everybody can't have last period planning. You try to rotate that where everybody doesn't get last period. The same people don't get it all the time. You make sure that the teacher that has trouble getting to work on time doesn't have first period planning, or they never show up to second period. I inherited one of those one time. You make sure that you have to do commonsensical best practices kind of things. Then you get the teacher input, what they want, because many times they don't want. They're looking out for their own self-interest. That's just normal. Hopefully, when you become that great transformational leader that we're going to learn about in 605, where you inspire and motivate, that folks will see school as more than just a place to get a check and be convenienced. That they'll learn that school's about doing the right thing for kids. But until you become that person, 9 times out of every 10, they come to you with suggestions for the master schedule, it's something to accommodate the staff rather than the student. And you have to know that, and that's why they come last. So those are the things that I covered tonight. Didn't take us long, but we did some general discussion, but that's that's the biggies that I want to get to you. Make sure you do all the OMAs, skip 1 and 2, cap 1, finish up task 3 of the OMA this week, write your competencies next week for task 4. They don't have to be peer reviewed, so that when I see you again in 2 weeks, we should be starting the skip, and I will cover the skip again at that time, and the cap when we get there. We're going to talk about EC, special ed, special populations in 2 weeks, talk about intervention team, MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, RTI, response to intervention. We're going to talk about those things in 2 weeks. I have all those things on the board for week 8. You can go ahead and take a look at those, and that's what we're going to cover in 2 weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. That's all I had tonight. Cyberbullying is still on the books. It's important. In my opinion, number 1, most likely to get you if you don't deal with it in terms of losing your job. So make sure that you know what the ins and outs of cyberbullying. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good vacation. Bye-bye.